But whether they want to hear it or not, the Lord always sends forth watchmen to warn. He always does. He never does anything till He warns. The gospel of accommodation. Now, to accommodate means to adapt. It means to make suitable or acceptable. It also means to adjust, to make something very convenient. It means to yield to the desires of others, to placate them. Now, you put that together, and I'm talking about a gospel that's been invented in hell and is now being propagated all over the United States. It's a suitable, acceptable, convenient, a gospel that has yielded to the desires and the weakness of sinful men. I call it the gospel of accommodation because it's adapting and adjusting the gospel to appease and attract sinners. This gospel accommodation is primarily an American cultural invention to ease our lifestyle. It appeals primarily to white America, rich and prosperous. It was invented out of hell itself. This new gospel is sweeping the America and the nation. It's influencing ministers of every denomination. It's giving birth to mega churches. Some of the largest churches in the United States are involved in this gospel. It's a non-confronting, convenient gospel, adapted. It is spoon-fed to the congregation by skits, humorous skits and drama, short, non-abrasive, 20-minute messages, and it's all called seeker-friendly.
Isaiah 30 verse 10. 30 verse 10. They say to the seers, you must not see visions. And to the prophets, you what? You must not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us pleasant or smooth words. Prophesy illusions. Look at me now. An apostate church wants nothing to do with visions or prophecies of men of righteousness. They don't want anything to do with it. You know that's the gospel. You know that's the truth. They want to hear messages. They want nothing that disturbs the status quo. Nothing to upset the successful world in which they move and live.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club, where we study and research Bible prophecy. Our topic tonight is America's occult holidays. Now, I was raised celebrating these holidays and doing things like trimming jack-o'-lanterns, and I went on trick-or-treat, and I didn't understand what I was doing either, so don't feel bad when you hear some things tonight that drop your mouth open and say, I had no idea what I was doing and what I was really celebrating. But in fact, there's a lot of occult behind our holidays. Now, that's not to say that we should not celebrate the birth of Jesus or the resurrection of Jesus. I will celebrate my Lord's holidays. But there is a lot of occult that is wound in them, and he's going to be exposing that. Well, who is he, and has he earned the right to talk about that? As a matter of fact, he has. His family has been in the Illuminati for 189 years, 7 generations. He's a third-degree master witch. He was raised in an occultic Illuminati family. And I asked him, I said, Doc, have you read books? Have you researched this? Did you go down to the library to learn all of these things? And he said, no. He said, this is just the way we lived. This is the way we celebrated our God. And Christians are celebrating the wrong God in some of these occultic ceremonies. Our speaker also has been on and appeared in and consulted for the Oprah Winfrey Show, the Geraldo Vera Show, Hard Copy, Inside Edition, Unsolved Mysteries. And there's one thing that I really like about Doc. He is really after winning souls, taking them out of the devil's kingdom and putting them in God's kingdom. He is a real soul winner, and he loves the Lord. Will you help me welcome Doc Marquis?
Many of us normally celebrate various holidays thinking that they're Christian or that they're American ones and that there's nothing wrong with them. What we are going to learn tonight is going to startle most of you. Hopefully, it'll challenge you. If nothing else, this information has been kicking up a lot of dirt. I'm not kidding. I have seen reactions that I did not think was going to happen. I am talking about where people literally, I tell you, you'd almost think that they were going to get into a fight over this. But then again, as Christians, we're not supposed to be standing still anyways. We're supposed to be moving and serving the Lord. Now, I'm going to give you the very short version of how I got into the occult to begin with. When I say short, I'm not kidding. I have a ton of materials I need to present to you people. When I was 3 years old, I was brought to my dedication ceremony in the Illuminati. Now, this is not unusual. Many people here in the Christian community, you will take your children, you'll bring them to your various churches, your denomination, what have you, and you'll offer them up to God, correct? Well, in the occult world, they're doing the same thing, except they're offering their children up to Lucifer. Now, this is nothing unusual. It really isn't. For the occultists, this is a normal practice. When you look at anything in the occult, all you have to do is compare it to the Bible. You're going to find out just about everything in the occult was either reversed or perverted from the Holy Scriptures. In the end, you're going to find out that Lucifer has never had an original idea yet. All he did was create a war and think he was going to become God. And we all know what happened then. For the next 10 years, I was put into what's known as the outer court. Now, this is best understood as the Illuminati's version of a seminary. This is where you're taught all the rites, the rituals, the 8 nights of human sacrifice, spellcasting, alchemy, so on and so forth. So by the time I was 13, at the end of another ceremony, this was my initiation ceremony now, they brought forth a book that was made out of lamb's hide. It's known as the Book of the Dead in the occult. They brought forth a quilled feather and then a ceremonial knife called athame. They sliced my arm wide open, passed me that quilled feather. I had to dip it in my own blood and sign my new occult name in this book. This made me one of them. Now, isn't it interesting how in the book of Revelation we find out that in heaven there's an angel signing our name in the Lamb's Book of Life? Again, just another occult counterfeit. For the next 4 years, I was going through the ranks like all other Illuminists, to where by the time I was 17, I became initiated as a High Druid priest, or what's best understood as a third-level witch or a master witch. At that point, it gave me authority over a particular region. Now, a region is a governing area in which, in this case, the third-level witch had full authority over. We had a little bit more than 1,000 Illuminists within this area at the time. A year and a half later, I went into the United States Army under orders from my bosses in the Illuminati. Now, this was not my idea. Okay, don't get me wrong. You know, but I did not go in for patriotic reasons back then. I would do it now, but the Illuminati, since the mid-60s, have had an ongoing plan in which they were sending in hundreds and thousands of their own people to where they wanted to infiltrate every single military base around the world. Once these bases were infiltrated, they would start setting up their own covens. Now, the reason they were doing this was so that they could recruit key people from the military into their own ranks. And this would help them out tremendously. Let's say you were into communications, and I initiated you into the coven. Well, because you had access to communications, you're one of us. I now have access to communications. If you had access to supplies, I had anything I wanted because you were now one of us. I had access to what you had access to. And unfortunately, the Illuminati is too good at what they do, because as of April 1978, if you check the Army Chaplain's Handbook on Religious Requirements, you will find out that just about every single major occult religion is listed in it. We're talking Satanism, witchcraft, you name it, it's just about there. And it's all legal. They're federally recognized, they have tax exemption, they have priesthood status, and it's all perfectly legal to be practiced on every single military base throughout the world now. And you know, there's nothing we can legally do to stop it. Of course, we weren't going to be told that this is what was really going on, but nevertheless, they did it. Well, to make a very long story short, when I was at Fort Lewis, Washington, a young man, I didn't know him too well, he was just an acquaintance, walked up to me and started a conversation. Shortly after that, he had to leave, but he asked me if I wanted to go to church with him on Sunday. You know, and back then, of course, there was no way you were going to get me to set foot in any church. You know, but I have to tell you the truth. Let me tell you, for the next 3 years, my life literally was a nightmare. Because no matter where I went, and no matter how far I went, there were some born-again Christians just waiting to witness to me. I mean, they were falling out of the trees, jumping out of the bushes, and I am not kidding when I tell this. This is the truth. I actually saw one jump out of a moving vehicle once to try to witness to me, but I ran faster that day than that Christian did. To wrap it up, as I was saying, I have a lot to present, but at the end of those 3 years, I finally saw what I was doing in light of what the Christians were saying all along. On April 15th, 1979, I went into a Christian church as a sold-out slave of Satan's, and I left as a born-again child of the King. And for the last 18.5 years, I've been running a ministry called Christians Exposing the Occult. We're in there trying to get people out of the occult. There's more going on nowadays than most Christians would realize. And it's sad. It really saddens me at times because we're the only ones who actually can be used of God to get these people out. And so many times, we just don't seem to be doing it. What we are going to be doing now, as I stated before, we're going to be going over certain holidays. Just about every single holiday you can think of, and we're going to get into the origins of all this. I am hoping that at the end, this challenges you. Not to go out and have me shot, but challenges you as a Christian, your conviction, your dedication to Christ. There were 8 nights of human sacrifice on the Illuminati's calendar. Starting from the top, December 21st is the night of Yule. It moves down to Imbolg, Ostara, Beltane, Litha, Lughnasadh, Mabon, and finally Samhain. Now the reason December 21st is at the top is because according to the Celtic calendar, this is the calendar that the Illuminati uses to this very day. The last day of the old year is October 31st. It begins on November 1st, the new year. Now you're going to find out this will have great significance. We will be getting to that. As we look through these nights, you're going to find interesting things are happening to them. If you recall in Genesis chapter 1, I believe it's verse 16, the reason God put the sun, the stars, the planets up in heaven was for us to measure the seasons by and to watch out for certain signs. This was the very specific purpose God put them there. And look at this. The winter solstice, the spring equinox, the summer solstice, and the autumnal equinox. Those are the seasons we're supposed to measure on the calendar. And yet, look at what the occultists did. Already they started perverting it by putting those nights of human sacrifice right on them. And mind you, those 4 nights that line up with the 4 seasons, those are the minor ones. That's to say, almost as if to say, well, God is so minor in his plans that we're not even going to bother to recognize them with the major holidays. Nevertheless, these holidays constitutes already a perversion of our calendar. And you're going to see just how bad this has really gotten. Starting with December 21st. From December 21st down to February 1st, there was a 6-week period. From February 1st to March 21st, there was a 7-week period. Then notice how the pattern keeps repeating itself. 6, 7, 6, 7, all the way down. And there is a very good reason for this. You will also note that those groupings of 6 and 7 constitute sets of 13s, 4 13s to be specific. And you're going to see this pattern repeated as we go along. How many people have heard of numerology before? Just raise your hand, please. Right. We all know that numerology is where you take numbers and you assign them to specific letters. There is another system in the occult that's known as gematria. Gematria will give you the definition to all the different numbers. For instance, 19 is the number for faith, 35 is the number for hope, so on and so forth. The ones we want to concentrate on is the number 6, 7, and 13. 6 is the number for man, 7 is the number for God, and 13 is the number for depravity and rebellion. It's very important to remember this, because when we look at these calendars, you're going to find out that by using this numerical pattern, what they are actually stating is that through depravity and rebellion, they're placing man above God. And isn't this exactly what had happened in the great war in heaven when Lucifer and his followers were thrown out? He wanted to be God. It was through rebellion that he was thrown out. And if you remember, the scripture even tells us, for witchcraft is as the sin of rebellion. On this next transparency, we're going to add a couple things. Notice Yule, December 21st at the top. Right next to it, you're going to see Christmas. After that, we drop down to Groundhog's Day, which is on another night of human sacrifice, this one being in bold. May Day on the human night sacrifice of Beltane, and Halloween on the human night sacrifice of Samhain. These are just some of the holidays, some of the major ones that we celebrate. And can you see how they're already lining up with these occult Sabbaths? And you're going to find out that there was a reason. As we go through this, you will also note we're going to add different ones to it. This time, we will add Inauguration Day, January 20th, Valentine's Day, February 14th, April Fool's Day, Independence Day, July 4th, July 19th, 1996, which was the Olympic Games. You will note that the next Olympic Games is going to be on the human night sacrifice of Mabon in the year 2000. Now, there was something strange going on with the Olympic Games. How many of you can recall the way that they started the 1992 Olympic Game openings? Does anyone recall what they did? They had an archer take an arrow, and he had it lit, and he shot it into the air. It arced over and landed in the traditional Olympic bowl. This reminded me of the story of Prometheus, how he stole fire from the gods. Take a good look at this next transparency. You will notice that red spiraling object on top of the tower. That is the new Olympic bowl. Do you know what the papers were calling that? That was being referred to as the Olympic cauldron. And it was being properly referred to as a cauldron for some very specific reasons. First of all, just by looking at it, you can tell that this cauldron is a red one. It had to be red because the first family of the Illuminati, the head of it to this very day, Lord James the Rothschild himself, his name Rothschild from the German means red shield. Second of all, you will notice how that cauldron is spiraling down and inwardly. There's a very good reason for that. When witches, especially those in the Illuminati, are concluding a lot of their ceremonies, they will dance in a spiraling formation. The reason it spirals inward is because they're bringing together, supposedly, great metaphysical energies to where at the end of the ceremony they will release all this through the cone of power, and then it will go out to do whatever they want it to do. It's for this reason that they do that spiraling, because of the spiral dance. Those jet flames up there, there were 18 of them. The reason there was 18 because it constitutes the triplicity of their favorite number, 6 plus 6 plus 6. That's why there was 18. Now, in the occult world, there are two gods, the god and the goddess. Semiramis is the goddess. Her son/husband, Nimrod, is the god. Now, when you see the crescent moon, this is the oldest symbol that recognizes the goddess, or Semiramis. When you see the five-pointed star, you're looking at what's known as a pentagram. This is the symbol for Nimrod. Now, when you see the crescent moon and the five-pointed star in the center of it, you are looking at the oldest sign in existence that symbolizes both God and goddess, Semiramis and Nimrod. If you will look right here, you will notice this is a crescent moon. And you will see the five-pointed star sitting right in it. If we were to take that out, you would see another crescent moon here with a second star right above it. And then after that, the last crescent moon under the bottom with that yellow star up there. This is the new emblem for the Olympic game. As I stated before, the next Olympic game is going to happen September 21st in the year 2000, Sydney, Australia. I can only imagine what they're going to do this time. I don't expect it to get any better. I'm expecting it to get a lot worse. There is a reason why these days were put in the specific pattern they were. Starting at the top. When we look at Inauguration Day, January 20th, this is when your president takes his oath of office. Do you know originally it was never that? It used to be November. The Illuminati had it moved up purposely to where it fit the pattern. And we're going to go with that pattern right now. You will notice Inauguration Day is exactly 13 days before the human night sacrifice of Imbolg. Valentine's Day is exactly 13 nights after the human night sacrifice of Imbolg. Easter, I will get into that afterwards. They have to use astrology to figure out when Easter is going to be every year. I'll explain that afterwards. All Fool's Day, or April Fool's Day, is exactly 13 weeks from the beginning of your calendar. Independence Day is exactly 13 days after the human night sacrifice of Litha. Last year's Olympic game was exactly 13 days before the human night sacrifice of Lunasan. And if you notice, the next one is going to be exactly on the night of a human sacrifice. Are you beginning to see this numerical pattern? How all these 13s are lining up? Let's face it, we can't deny the mathematics of this. All you have to do is just sit down at the calendar and count. It will point out these are all separated by 13s. And there are reasons. The main reason, at least for this alignment, is because every single one of these holidays are occultic in origin. We're going to be able to, Lord willing, go over the majority of them tonight. Starting with Christmas. Now, I am very well aware that, of course, most people in the Christian realm, just about anyone for that matter of fact, believes Christmas has everything to do with the birthday of Jesus Christ, correct? However, when you look at the scriptures, there is no way, first of all, Jesus Christ could have been born on December 25th, as they like to state, because the Bible tells us that, if you look in the book of Luke, that the shepherds were still out in the field tending to their flock. To this very day, Judaic tradition teaches us they don't bring the sheep in from the fields until the second week of October. Christ could not have been born in December then. It had to have been right before that event had happened. If you have your Bibles, turn to Jeremiah chapter 10. There's an interesting event that's going on here. And then you tell me what this sounds like. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen. Get that one memorized, folks. Learn not to do what these occultists are doing. What are they doing? Learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen, with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. That's a Christmas tree. You go to the forest, chop it down with the axe, bring it home, nail it or put it in that little upright stand, take gold and silver trimmings, deck it all around, voila, you have a Christmas tree. We think this tree is supposed to be part of the birthday of Christ. How? That one's still a mystery to me, but I have to tell you, when you look at the occult religion, you're going to find out that there are very specific trees that are very sacred in the occult realm. Just a couple examples I put up here. The oak tree is the most sacred of all the trees for the Druids. The Druids were the high priests of the Celtic tribe. As a matter of fact, the name Druid from the ancient Gaelic means the men of oak. The Egyptian, well, they had plenty of palm trees around there. That became a very sacred tree to their god Ra. And of course in Scandinavia, where Odin was supposedly the chief god of the entire pantheon, he wanted the fir tree. Now, these people in the occult nowadays, they are still taking gold and silver decorations, putting it on their trees. A lot of them are taking cookies, putting them on the trees also after they baked them. They will take chestnuts, tie traditional Christmas color ribbon around them, or I should say Yule ribbons. See, you call Christmas what it is. The occult, it's properly known as Yule. We'll get to that. But they will take the traditional colors, either red or green, tied around chestnuts, and hang it from the tree. This is how just, some of the items became part of your so-called Christmas holiday. It is also, if you remember, the five-pointed star, the pentagram, is the oldest symbol that represents Nimrod. See, in the occult world, from November 1st all the way through April 30th, the god is in charge. He will rule over the world for those 6 months. After that, the goddess takes over. At this point of the season, he is known as the winter god. He is also commonly referred to as the horned god, the stag god, the god of the hunt, so on and so forth. It is for this reason, his symbol, the five-pointed star now, you've been placing it on top of these Christmas trees. How many of us have done this in the past? Be honest, yeah. We've been putting those on top of our trees. In the old days, of course, what they used to do, they would take candles, put them on the branches of the trees and light them. They would also take these same candles and put them on their windowsills. But you got to remember This time of the year, the nighttime is longer than the daytime, correct? What this candle does is send out light. Now this is according to the occult belief now. Sends these lights out from the homes to where the winter god can see them, and he will come down and bless the people in that household. These lights are welcoming back the winter god himself. But of course nowadays we've modernized this, and we have these multicolored lights that blink on and off, and these fake candles we put in the windowsill, but it's still the exact same thing. You put those on your trees, you put those on top of your windowsills, you're doing exactly what those people in the occult are doing to this very day. You're welcoming in the occult winter god. Then of course there are the various plants that we are using to celebrate the season. We've seen mistletoe before. It's a green plant with white berries that are very, very poisonous. The mistletoe is a very sacred plant in the occult world. It's a fertility plant. It's for this reason that the custom of when you walk under the mistletoe you're supposed to kiss, that's what it's symbolizing, the rites of fertility. The Christmas wreath. It is circular in its design, and it was done so for a reason. And I'm going to try to be as tactful about this as possible. But if the truth be known, this, first of all, represents the cycle of life and the cycle of reincarnation. The reason that is so is because, occultically speaking, again, this is another fertility symbol, because it represents the female sexual organs. And it's for this reason why in the occult world there is still placed candles around it, because it symbolizes the male phallic symbol, the unification of both of them. And of course we've seen the holly plant before. This is again another fertility plant. It's a minor one in the occult, but this one is still used to celebrate the Yule season in the occult world. And of course a lot of us honestly believe that these holidays are harmless, that there's nothing wrong with them. Well, as we continue along, how many people, if this is really a harmless holiday, could honestly right now explain the origins of Santa Claus? Let's face it, Santa Claus, just like these holidays, just didn't fall out of heaven. They had to have come somewhere. In the occult world, remember, as I stated before, the winter god is known as the stag god. Through the myth that are found in the occult world, Satan is actually trying to convince his followers that he is like God. See, God has three qualities that, of course, no one else has. He's omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. He sees all, he knows all, he is all-powerful. This is God, just part of God. When we look at the characteristics of Santa Claus, how many of us remember Santa Claus is also omnipotent, according to the legends? Do you know he can tell you at any given time who's been bad and who's been good? And according to one popular story, Santa Claus learned how to pick up snow and make it into a snowball. And this snowball is actually used as a crystal ball. He actually learned to do this through the winter god. He's got the power to look through this crystal ball, use it as a scrying device, and divine who's been good and who's been bad. As far as him being everywhere, well, yes, according to the myths, he also has the ability to be like God and be omnipresent. Because according to the story, he can circumnavigate the world in hours and give everyone what they deserve. And if you look at the Scandinavian legend, especially where we get into Odin, according to the ancient myths, Odin took out one of his eye and threw it in the well of knowledge, so he himself would gain wisdom. Now, aren't these the three things that make up God? All-knowing, all-powerful, and all-present. This is exactly what Satan is telling his followers through this particular occult holiday. And mind you, why do you think they have reindeers in this story? They symbolize the stag god. These are stag creatures, aren't they? And there's 8 of them for a very specific reason. 8 in gematria stands for new beginnings. However, 8 is the only number, when you place it on its side, becomes an occult symbol. And that is the symbol for infinity, the infinite yearly return of the stag god. Why do you think Rudolph, has a red nose? It's the traditional colors. In the celebration of Yule, in the occult world, there is always red and green. These are the 2 colors that are used during that time of the year. The mistletoe, holly, wreath, the pine trees, the fir trees, all of them are green. The holly berries, the bows, Santa's clothes, Rudolph's nose, all that is red. You people didn't create this stuff. It was already there. All that happened is that it was brought into your American calendar and it became Americanized and Christianized. That's how you get this. So the question is, whose birthday is December 25th then, if it's not Jesus Christ? Semiramis and Nimrod, the 2 original co-founders of the occult world, had a child. He was known as Tammuz. Tammuz was born on December 25th. 4 days before December 25th is when the night of Yule begins. It was purposely brought to December 25th for a reason, as far as Christmas goes. It was done for a reason. Back during the early Roman Empire days, when you had the first popes, of course, we know historically speaking, the first one was Constantine. He took over Rome in 313 AD and then established the Council of Trent and declared what was known as the Edict of Milan in 323 AD, to where he started what he wanted now, what he called a state religion. Now, Constantine, and this is historically, you can prove this easily, was a practicing pagan. He was an occultist. He took these pagan occult rituals and holidays, put them in this new state religion, and if you would, candy-coated it with an air of Christianity. The reason he did that, because he knew the pagans would recognize this for what it really was and still come in. December 25th, as I stated before, is the birthday of Tammuz. What was also going on during the Roman empires in those days, on December 25th now, was the day of Saturnalia. To the Romans, the head of all the gods was the god known as Saturn. This festival to Saturn was marked with a couple very specific events. First of all, there would be great banquets. Second of all, people would be drinking till they could drink no longer. Third, they would be giving out presents to one another. Now think about this. Don't we have our traditional Christmas banquets to this very day? Aren't we having wassail and other different types of drinks during this holiday? Aren't we exchanging presents on December 25th? All this you get because of the occult. When you think about it, what would any of this have to do with the birthday of Christ anyways? Even some of these traditions, and I do mean traditions. We've been taught tradition and not scriptures. Tradition tells us that there was 3 wise men that made it to the manger, correct? Scripture tells us those wise men never made it to the manger. They never made it till Christ was 2 years old and he was in his Father's workshop. That's what the Bible tells us. Tradition tells us otherwise. Tradition also tells us, well, this is the birthday of Jesus Christ. We have to make up our minds if we're going to go by tradition or if we're going to go by Scripture. As I stated before, this is going to strike home, and it may hit some of you very hard. But the truth is, as born-again Christians, we have to remember Jeremiah chapter 10 tells us we are not supposed to learn the way of the heathens. You will find out when Joshua was bringing the children of Israel into the promised land, the reason God threw all those people and those nations out was because they were all practicing the occult religions. God named the 9 reasons why they were being cast out of those nations, and every single one of those reasons, you look at them, were occultic ones. This is how evil, how foul this stuff is in the eyes of God. And yet, for some reason, we honestly think that there's nothing wrong with this stuff, that if we just say, well, God, you know my heart, you know that I'm honoring you. How are we honoring God if we're doing it through occult holidays? I can't see how we honestly can say we are honoring God if we're doing it the exact same way those people in the occult are doing it to this very day. And yet, of course, there's a lot of other holidays that we think, well, let's put it this way, that we have Christianized. And we have actually fooled ourselves into believing are Christian. The next one would be Easter. This one, let's face it, this one is extremely popular. This one is supposed to be the resurrection of Jesus Christ, correct? And yet, you're going to find out Easter and the resurrection of Jesus Christ have absolutely nothing in common. Now, if you remember in Genesis, at the Tower of Babel, and this is the classic rendition of the Tower of Babel itself, the people there had sinned against God. They formed a one-world government under a one-world people, under a one-world language, under a one-world tongue, under a one-world religion, which was the occult. The co-founders of this occult religion was Nimrod and Semiramis. God did not want this to happen. So in order to get these people to finally break away from this and their sin, he confused their language. The people went throughout the entire world. Now think about this for a second. When these people left, do you think that they forgot anything? Do you think that they suddenly forgot their occult religion? Do you think they finally that they forgot where they came from and what they did? Of course they didn't. When we take a look at the next great empire that came about after Babylon, we see something very interesting here. Now down here is a great pyramid of Giza. It's on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. But if you look at the top one, that is what's known as a step pyramid. It was one of the earliest pyramids ever built. It was built by the pharaoh Djoser. Isn't that the exact formation that they were building the Tower of Babylon with? Something very interesting is happening to us both historically and prophetically. It all started in Babylon, as far as our civilization goes. a one world religion, one world people under one world language, one financial system, so on and so forth. It's going to come around, and according to the scriptures, we're going to have Babylon all over again. We're going to have this one world order under a one world people, under a one world occult religion. We're doomed to repeat history because we did not learn the mistakes of it. We have really gone off the mark. But as I stated before, you will notice, same formation. What is even more interesting, how many people have heard of the European Common Market, and that they're trying to create a one world monetary system known as the European Unit? Here is their official logo. What is that? Right, that's the Tower of Babylon again. Look at the inscription down here, Europe. Many tongues, one voice. They want to reverse and undo what God did. God took one voice and turned it into many languages. They want to take those many languages and unite them under one voice, just one people again. The 5 pointed stars up there, those are inverted pentafors. Those are the common symbols that are used by those people in Satanism. But there is also something very peculiar going on here. I want you to pay very close attention to this next transparency, and you'll see why they're in the formation they're at. You look at the very top of this next transparency, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about. The oldest symbol in existence for Nimrod is the pentaphor. Notice it is above or crowning Babylon itself. This is completely telling you that the occult religion is going to be the head over this new Babylon. We're going back to where we started. If you remember in your scriptures, when Paul was going through Rome, Greece, the whole empire, well, Paul himself was not noted as a quiet man. If nothing else, Paul himself, let's face it, got into a bit of trouble. Thrown into prison at least 3 times. They tried to stone him to death. They definitely ran him out of town many times. And there was one particular event, if you people will recall it in the scriptures, where they went into, they actually were trying to get into this one temple and trying to tell these people, you're not supposed to be worshiping these false gods. And if you remember, this was in the city of Ephesus. These people were worshiping a goddess known as Diana. Remember how at the end they were shouting for hours afterwards, great is Diana of the Ephesians? They were doing this for a reason, but if you look at this list over here, Semiramis and Nimrod, their names are the only thing that change in the entire occult world. The practices are the same, but because the people went to Egypt, to Mesopotamia, to the Median Persian Empire, to Greece, to Rome, to Great Britain, and finally to America, the names were changed because of culture. The practices are still the same. Remember, when it finally got to Egypt, the sun god, which is what Nimrod was, is now known as Ra, the sun god. The moon goddess is now Isis. That's all that happened. The names changed, but the beliefs remained the same. When Paul finally got to Ephesus, the goddess that they were shouting about is Diana. This is one of the oldest statues that represents the goddess Diana. This is who they were making a big stink about back then. They were standing up in that temple for hours praising and worshiping this statue. Now remember, as I told you before, Semiramis is a fertility goddess. It is for this reason that you will notice that Diana is a many-breasted figure. It is still a fertility goddess. It did not change. The only thing that changed was the name. Again, if we go to the Roman belief system, their empire, we will look at Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. And she is also a fertility goddess. These are the pagan people that the people in Egypt were worshiping. Now, why are they worshiping a fertility goddess? What's going on? How did this bring about Easter? According to those legends, which are still found in the occult world today, after the first year when Semiramis had died, a giant multicolored egg had fallen out of heaven and landed in the Euphrates River. It washed ashore and landed in a pile of wicker reed. You've seen wicker furniture before, correct? We know how strong and durable that stuff can be. Out of this egg, Semiramis, in her reincarnated form as a spring goddess, broke out and would bless those followers of hers. Now, first of all, this is where you get the multicolored egg, the Easter egg, from. This is also where you get the Easter basket from. And the reason you get the word Easter is because of the Babylonian. In the Babylonian Talmud, if you check on the name of Easter, it is properly spelled I-S-H-T-A-R. It got confused, a lot of people got this confused, with the Egyptian rendition of it. A lot of people thought it was Ishtar. But if you check the original transliteration, the Babylonian one, it is still pronounced Easter to this very day. That is just another name for Semiramis, the moon goddess, or the fertility goddess of the occult world. Now, how many people, be honest, have ever attended a sunrise service? Just raise your hand. If you've ever gone, of course we have. Why? Do you know there's nothing in the Bible to base that on? Scripture, whenever it talked about the dawn, the twilight, sunrise, sundown, the night, the dark, the light, the day, it was mentioned. God knows time. He knows when it's light and dark. He put it in the Bible.